Thank you everyone for coming. This is our Saint 10 review or debut, I'm sorry. And we'll be going over the new user interface, all the new features, and this will be releasing on Tuesday the 6th. So a couple days from now. So really excited to show you this, and we will be it will be presented by our CTO Sam Kline, who is responsible for this. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to him and we'll get to showing you guys the new features.
Thanks, Quinn. So here's a quick agenda about what we're going to look at today. So these are all the new features that are coming out on Tuesday in Saint 10. First and foremost, a redesigned graphical user interface. We also have improved severity ratings, improved dashboards, some changes to support new compliance, and a few other new features. And then after I show you a live demo, we can take some questions. So first of all, here's your first look at what the Saint 10 graphical user interface will look like. It's a modernized web interface. So as you can see, it's kind of a softer and cleaner look. We got rid of some of the grid lines. We got rid of some of the sharp edges. So it's a little bit more of a modern look. We also condensed the menu bar at the top. So that allows a little bit more space for the content of the page and not so much room taken up by the menu bar. Another new change coming in Saint 10 is that by default, we will use all industry standard severity ratings. So as you can see here, CVSS v2 and CVSS v3, we use the low, medium, high, and critical ratings for both of those. And those are industry standard definitions. That's not something that we came up with ourselves. But we are going to use the industry standards by default moving forward. So that Saint results can be easily compared to results from other databases and other products. And we're also have full support for CVSS v3 now. So things like tickets, ticket rules, and ticket exports, you now have options to create rules for CVSS v3 as well as CVSS v2. And as far as reporting goes, we now have reports specifically to report on the CVSS v2 and CVSS v3 severities. And I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. Another new feature coming in Saint 10 is improved dashboards. So here you can see what the new default dashboard will look like. Besides the style changes, we also changed some of the panels here. So you may notice in the top left panel of the dashboard now features a breakdown of vulnerabilities by CVSS v3 score. The top center panel will show you the vulnerabilities by exploitability. And then at the bottom of the dashboard, you see the details of all critical and high vulnerabilities according to CVSS v3. We also have a new built-in trend analysis dashboard, which I'll show you a little bit later. And there's more drill down capability. So in pretty much every dashboard panel, you can click on any pie wedge or any bar and see more information. So also, all the analytics screens are now available as dashboard panels. So everything you used to get from that analytics tab, you can now get directly on your dashboard without having to move away from the dashboard. And also all of the columns which were available in the analytics are also available in the dashboard now. A few changes we made to support compliance. We now have support for ASV Program Guide 4.0. So that goes hand in hand with PCI DSS 4.0 if you're using that. And we also added support for GDPR. GDPR has some, it has some controls which tell you how to handle data. And although Saint isn't necessarily configured to be GDPR compliant out of the box, it is pretty simple to make it GDPR compliant. And we now have a guide in the My Saint portal telling you exactly how that can be done. A few other new features which are worthy of mention. You can now configure the text messages for two-step verification. So previously, if you were using 2FA for logging into Saint, you would just get a text message which was nothing but a 6-digit code. Now you can configure the text message to be a little more user-friendly, so users know what that code is when it comes in. We have a new API call to view vulnerability identifiers. We have a new header bar alert for low disk space. So there's been if you've ever had a problem with the database becoming corrupt because your disk space filled up, well, now Saint will alert you to that before it happens so that you can clear some disk space and avoid corruption. We now support exploit exclusions. So if you like the exclusions feature when you're looking at vulnerability scan data, we now have the same feature when you're looking at pen test data. We'll now show you the AWS metered license usage in the footer. So that really only applies if you're using the AWS metered, if you launched the paid machine from the AWS marketplace, then you'll see at the bottom how much usage you have so that you don't get hit by a surprise bill at the end of the month. And finally, you can customize the database port. So if you happen to be running your database on a remote machine on a non-standard port, you can now enter that non-standard port. And that brings me to the live demo. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is the Saint 10 user interface. As you saw in the slides before, it has a kind of a softer and cleaner look with no grid lines. This is what the scan jobs page looks like. It's pretty much the same type of information you saw before, but just styled a little bit differently. You'll also see along the top that the menu bar is a little bit smaller, which leaves more room on the page for content. That sub-menu bar, which used to be there, is not shown by default, but it can be enabled in your profile if you'd like to bring it back. And one of the big new features in Saint 10 is the dashboard. So I'm going to go there now. So this is the default dashboard, which shows you the panels that we saw before. The CVS SV3 score, vulnerabilities by exploitability, the most vulnerable hosts, and the details down here at the bottom. And as I mentioned before, you can get more information by clicking on any pie wedge or bar. So for example, if I click on the critical wedge and vulnerabilities by CVS SV3 score, then it gives us a grid showing us what those critical vulnerabilities are. Also, if we were to, for example, we want to know what the 73 vulnerabilities are that were detected, which are on the CISA known exploited list, we could click there and it'll tell us what those 73 vulnerabilities are. And then once you get here, it's a grid which we can page through as usual. We also have new columns available. So for example, if we want to see vulnerabilities that have an exploit, you can just go to this column chooser up here, and pretty much every data column which is available in the analytics is now also available in the dashboards. So you have all these different columns that you can choose to enable or disable in your dashboard grids. I mentioned also that there's a new default dashboard. So this is the one that comes up by default, but there's another built-in dashboard, which is the trend analysis dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and open that dashboard. So this built-in dashboard gives you a little bit more information pertaining to the changes in your vulnerability posture across time. So the top three panels are the same. In this built-in dashboard, you still have the CVS SV3, the vulnerabilities by exploitability, and so on. But along the bottom, you see different information. You see the status of all vulnerabilities. So in this case, we can see that 99% of the vulnerabilities were pre-existing, and 1% of the vulnerability, or one vulnerability actually, was new. which is this small wedge here. And as usual, you can click on either of the wedges to see more information. So I click on the big wedge to see which vulnerabilities are pre-existing since the last scan. And then on the right here, we see our vulnerability history by CVSS v3 score. So this is a stacked graph where we can see between November 26 and November 28, we can see how many vulnerabilities of each severity were detected. And we can click on any of these data points to see what they were. So if we want to see what the critical vulnerabilities were on November 25, we click there and we get the details about that. There are a number of new panels which have been added as well. So besides these two built-in dashboards, there are a whole lot of other things that you can view. So for example, we now have a dashboard which shows the vulnerability history by PCI status across time. So if I choose to enable that, then we can see on each date that the scan ran, we can see how many vulnerabilities passed and how many failed. And the graph will show you how that changes across time. And these are drillable as well. I can click on that to see what the passing vulnerabilities were on November 25. A few other new panels that are worthy of mention. If I click on this detail panels, we see that all the things which existed as options under the Analyze tab are now available as dashboard panels as well. So if we want to see the full scan results here, then we can click on that and we get the all scan results dashboard panel. This is the same as the all scan results Analyze grid, which is up here that we're used to, but now it's available as a dashboard panel. So you don't have to move away from your dashboard in order to see the full scan results. And we have a number of other new panels as well, a lot of them having to do with CVSS. So we have CVSS v2 high, CVSS v2 medium, CVSS v2 low, and then all the version 3. So a lot more detailed panels there are to choose from now. And there's also a dashboard panel for viewing vulnerabilities by asset tags. So I'm going to click on vulnerabilities by asset tag, and that lets us choose which asset tag we want to see. So I'm going to choose the OS class. That's one of the built-in asset tags, which gets created by default anytime you scan an asset. And then we're going to choose the CVSS v3 severity scale, although you could choose CVSS v2 or the legacy Saint severity or a custom severity, but we'll leave it as CVSS v3. We apply that, and this shows us the vulnerability counts by severity level for each of those two values of the OS class asset tag. So we can see that for Linux targets, we had 181 total vulnerabilities, of which 78 were critical. For Windows targets, you can see the same kind of information. And of course, you can click on any one of these in order to get the specifics. So that gives you a good idea of what the dashboards look like. Let me move along to analytics. So another thing I mentioned at the beginning was that we now by default use industry standard severity ratings. So when you go to any of these grids under the Analyze tab, you'll notice that the rating is now the CVSS v3 rating using the standard rating definitions. Critical is 9 to 10, high is 7 through 8.9, and so on. And you can filter your results on these as well. So if you just want to see the mediums, you can choose that. So this is filterable as it always has been. And if you prefer the legacy severity codes, such as critical problems, areas of concern, potential problems that you may already be used to, those are still available in the column chooser. So we can just go to choose columns, and then we can just add those, and they'll show up as they always did. They're just not shown by default anymore, but they're still available. And the same is true in reporting. When we go to reports, when we click on create report, the default report type is now the CVSS v3 report. This is similar to the reports we had before, but this is a new report type which uses the CVSS v3 severity ratings instead of the legacy Saint severity ratings. And just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to generate a report here really quick. I choose HTML, then it generates the report. So this is the same kind of report that you're used to from previous versions. Only now you see that the vulnerability by severity chart is by CVSS v3 rating instead of the legacy Saint severity codes. And down here in the vulnerability list, you'll also see that the CVSS v3 ratings are there instead of the legacy Saint severity codes. So that just makes Saint's severity reporting a little bit more industry standard rather than using our own codes. And if you prefer the original Saint severity, what we now call the legacy Saint severity ratings, those are still available. So all of these reports that existed before, those haven't changed. So the full scan, the vulnerability report, the overview, all of those report types will still use the original Saint severity codes in case you prefer those. And one other thing I wanted to mention about Saint 10 is Saint 10 is the first Saint version which runs exclusively using Python 3. So the previous version also supported Python 2, even though Python 3 was the default. But as of Saint 10, Python 2 will no longer be supported. So if your installation is still using Python 2, make sure you go ahead and change that to Python 3. Otherwise, you won't get the update to Saint 10. And that's about it for the demo. Quinn, back to you.